Ladies and gentlemen, they say history is the record of the strong. But if you look closely between those lines, you'll find hidden moments of humiliation, where great empires were soundly beaten and chased away by warriors from nameless islands. Today's story takes us back to the 16th century, a time when Spain, the ruler of the world's oceans and leader of the so-called invincible Armada, encountered the massive jungles of the Philippines and warriors, far more ruthless than themselves. This wasn't just a fight of guns and swords. This was a game of survival played in swamps filled with poison needles, booby traps, and starving crocodiles. Let's dive into the chilling 7 victories of the Filipino warriors that had Spanish officers, clutching their crucifixes and wailing in the night. Our first story begins with a name familiar to us all, Ferdinand Magellan. In 1521, dreaming of the world's first circumnavigation, Magellan arrived at Mactan Island. He was arrogant. It's only a matter of time before these savages, without armor, kneel before my modern cannons, he thought. But Lapu-Lapu, the chieftain of Mactan, laughed at him. Lapu-Lapu waited for low tide when the Spanish ships couldn't get close enough to use their cannons effectively. As the Spanish soldiers, weighed down by heavy metal armor, struggled through knee-deep mud, thousands of warriors erupted from the jungle. They used arrows tipped with toxic sea urchin spines and sharp bamboo, aiming precisely at the gaps in the armor, the neck, and the legs. Magellan was struck in the left leg by a poisoned arrow and collapsed. The enraged warriors surrounded him and literally trampled and hacked his body into the mud with bamboo spears. Magellan, the hero of global exploration, met a miserable end in the filth of a Philippine beach. This was the first blood-soaked lesson for the empire, but Spain did not give up. Decades later, they began a full-scale war of conquest. This leads us to the second victory, the Cagayan battles in northern Luzon. This time, the Spanish were prepared, deploying elite infantry and musketeers. However, they didn't face simple villagers. They encountered a hybrid force of Filipino warriors and Wokou roving samurai from Japan. According to records, this battle was a literal slaughterhouse. The razor-sharp katanas of the samurai and the poisoned blades of the Filipinos tore through Spanish leather armor like paper. A Spanish chronicler wrote, "They were like demons who felt no pain. They did not stop charging until their heads were severed." Ultimately, the Spanish fleet had to flee down the river, clutching their blood-stained armor in retreat. The third victory was the clash with the Moro warriors of southern Mindanao. The Spanish called them the Sons of the Devil. Why? Because these warriors used a terrifying suicide tactic called juramentado. Before going into battle, they would bind their limbs tightly with cords to minimize blood loss and enter a state of religious frenzy. In the few seconds it took a Spanish soldier to fire and reload a musket, a Moro warrior would keep charging even after taking 3 bullets to the chest. He would reach the Spaniard and, in a final burst of madness, cleave him from shoulder to chest with a single blow. Spanish officers wrote in their diaries, "We are not fighting humans. We are fighting beasts that mock death." The humid jungles of Mindanao became a graveyard for Spanish soldiers. The fourth victory was a masterpiece of psychological warfare using the terrain. In the 1570s, a Spanish expedition was pushing deep into the heart of Luzon, but they didn't know that every step they took was a potential death. Trap pits filled with venomous snakes were dug everywhere, and silent poison blow darts rained down from the canopy. The Filipino warriors avoided head-on battles. Instead, they cut off supply lines and spent every night mimicking the cries of wild beasts around the camp, gnawing at the Spaniards' nerves. When driven mad by sleep deprivation, soldiers would bolt into the woods, only to find invisible nooses and sharpened bamboo stakes waiting for them. The Spanish retreated after losing half their unit without ever fighting. A single pitch battle. The fifth victory took place on the high seas. Filipino warriors operated sleek, lightning-fast warships called Caracoa. When massive Spanish galleons got stuck in shallow coastal waters, dozens of Caracoas would appear like a pack of wolves encircling a wounded whale. The warriors rained fire arrows onto the decks. When the panicked Spaniards jumped into the sea to escape the flames, they were met by sharp harpoons waiting in the water. In this battle, Spain not only lost massive amounts of gold and silver, but suffered an irreparable wound to the pride of the invincible Armada. The sixth victory was the resistance of the Igorot tribes. In the northern highlands, Spain coveted the gold mines in this region, but the Igorots were the masters of the mountains. They crushed Spanish cannons with boulders and triggered landslides to bury entire infantry units. Most terrifyingly, they had a tradition of taking the heads of captured soldiers as trophies. Seeing the severed heads of their comrades mounted on poles around the Igorot forts caused the Spanish troops to lose their will to fight. Spain attempted to conquer this region for 300 years, but in the end they had to withdraw without ever truly controlling a single inch of that golden land. Finally, the seventh victory, the Siege of Balair. At the end of the 19th century, although famous for the Spanish soldiers holding out for nearly a year, it was symbolically the event that cut the final throat of Spanish imperialism. Trapped in a church, the Spanish soldiers resorted to eating rats and drinking their own urine to survive. Outside, the Filipino warriors taunted them by wafting the scent of delicious food toward the church and tossing flyers every day saying, "Your king has abandoned you." When the last officer finally emerged with a white flag, the glory of the Spanish Empire that once commanded the world was utterly trampled under the feet of Filipino revolutionaries. Everyone, what do these 7 victories tell us? Even when the smell of Western gunpowder covered the globe, the grit and ingenuity of warriors defending their own land overwhelmed that firepower. The warriors of the Philippines didn't just swing swords. They made the jungle their friend and used fear as a weapon to dismantle a giant empire. Even now, somewhere deep in the Philippine jungle, a piece of 700-year-old Spanish armor might be buried in the dirt. Beneath the hollow name of the invincible Armada lie the screams of those soldiers and the fierce war cries of the Filipinos who caused them. We must remember that history is often written with the blood of those who refuse to be recorded as conquered. I hope these records of brutal yet magnificent victories were intriguing. The human will that refuses to kneel, even before the overwhelming power of imperialism and the bizarre, bone-chilling episodes that occurred in the process, always give us a strange thrill. Next time, we will go even deeper into the shadows of history to find stories of more nameless warriors who brought down giants. Subscribing and liking is the power that awakens the souls of these forgotten warriors. Thank you for watching.